and on the line with us is a contributor to the Federalist, thefederalist.com, DC McAllister. You can tweet DC at DC McAllister, DEN. And DC, welcome back. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. So the Senate has said it's okay to add women to the draft. And there are many of us going, Charlie Rangel has been on this program for the better part of 10 years, at least once a year, coming on and saying we need to have a draft so that everybody in America feels like they're part of all this and that there's some more diversity in our military and all that sort of thing. But I understand that you think this is a bad idea for women to be drafted. Do I have that right?
Oh, absolutely.
Why?
Definitely. The reason why women were never signed up for selective service and to be drafted was because of their inability to compete with men in combat roles. And that was the policy of the military. And when the Supreme Court decided that it was fair for men to be drafted, not men and women, it was based on that policy. So, of course, when the policy changed and they opened up the combat roles to women, then that bulldoze the way for the draft to be a part of it. And the problem is that really the ability of women to compete in that arena has not changed. Study after study has shown that. And so the need for them to be drafted would put them in harm's way. I also think that it's a principled problem as far as our society and drafting women to fight in wars when that's something that's really for men to do.
Okay, a couple of thoughts. Number one, men tend to be physically more, shall we say, beefy than women, more likely to succeed in combat, but only about 7 or 8%, if my recollection is correct, of people who are in the active military, even when we're having a war like we have been for the last 15 years, ever participate in combat. So there's lots and lots of roles that could be filled by people who are not combat ready physically, number one. Number two, what if we had a draft like many countries do, like Germany does, for example, where you get to choose? Do you want to go in the military or do you want to work in the nonprofit sector for a year? And in exchange for that, you get free college after you get out. Because for both genders, for all young people, what this provides is a rite of passage. It's the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah. It's the transition from childhood to adulthood, and it's an opportunity to see the world.
Well, number one, the first part where you're talking about only a certain percentage go into combat, that's true. But when you join the military, you go in as a soldier. You're trained to be in the infantry. You're put in harm's way, even in supporting roles. I mean, that's to be assumed, especially in time of war when you would have a draft. Just look at the situation with Jessica Lynch. You remember her? She was in a support role. Her Jeep was ambushed, and she was taken hostage, the first woman POW we've ever had. So she was taken hostage, and she was not in combat. So what we're saying is, do we want to put women into harm's way in time of war when we're going to have to draft them? Now, if women want to sign up and do any kind of different roles that they want to do, that's certainly their freedom of choice. But what are we saying as a society where we're going to, at a time of war, when we can be putting women in harm's way? And a lot of time when you have the draft, it is for those combat roles. And if we've already said that they can be in combat roles, then that's what they would probably
So what if there's an alternative to the military?
Well, I don't really understand the motivation of why do we have to have this rite of passage if we don't have that right now?
Actually, we do. What happens is young people go off to college and get insanely drunk.
Oh, well, that's true. I mean,
no, I'm dead serious about this. If you look anthropologically, you look at every society in the history of pretty much every culture, there is a point where people make that transition from childhood to adulthood. I mentioned bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah. It's the Jewish tradition. In Catholicism, it was confirmation, and there's another word for it. I forget. I didn't grow up Catholic, but virtually every society has that transition point. And what you find is the societies that lack that transition point, you see this delayed adulthood and immature behavior extending into people's 20s. And like I said, it used to be just graduating from high school, in fact, in many regards, was a major transition. Now it's graduating from college, but people don't make it. And there is no kind of clean delineation. I lived for a year in Germany back in the 80s, and you had to do a year of military service. Now, it was just men at that time. Did. Mm-hmm. But it was, I talked to so many of these young people. I worked at a nonprofit there. It was an international relief agency called Salem International. And we had probably a dozen of these volunteers working for us because we were a nonprofit. And it was a life-transforming experience. Why should women be forbidden from that? This was not military. This was running communities for abused kids and running hospitals.
Okay, these are two different issues you're talking about. I was also an exchange student to Germany. I lived in Germany as a student back in the 80s, so I can identify. That's a different issue. A society that says that you're required at 18 to go serve in the military, and if you don't want, then you have to go do nonprofit. Well, America is a very different kind of freedom country than Germany is.
Why?
I mean, we don't make people do things typically against their will.
Well, of course we do. Have you ever tried not paying your taxes?
Not when it comes to the military. Not typically. We do with the draft and their selective service. But what I'm saying is that that is just not something we have decided to do. We don't do that right now. We don't say you have to go into the military.
Try not signing up for selective service if you're an 18-year-old man.
For the possibility of being in the draft, but you're not required to do military service for a year in this country. I don't see that happening, and I don't see it happening for women. But if you want to stick to the topic of the draft, actually, and signing up for selective service, drafting women principally, this is a man's job. And you talk about this rite of passage. These kind of manly kinds of rites of passages have happened throughout human history, but they're very different for men than they are women. Women go through a different rite of passage than men have historically. And women, it's often, I hate to say this, close your ears if you're feminist, but usually the rite of passage for women was having babies, growing up, taking responsibility.
The coming out party. I'm familiar with what you're talking about.
This kind of thing. So, but as far as requiring people to get themselves into harm's way and put them, we do that for the men because even selective service says this is your duty as men. You're known to be stronger. This is your responsibility as a man to protect your homeland, to protect your families, to protect women. So on that point alone, I think we need to have men man up. That's their job, and it's not the job of women to do that.
Is it in your mind? First of all, I'm a little concerned that you're just discarding my suggestion that it could be military or non-military. I mean, this is a conversation we've had in the United States for years and years and years, and although we've never pulled it off, but other countries do it. Israel, I believe, does it.
We don't need to do it. Why I don't believe in that kind of. I'm too much of a libertarian that way. We don't need to be telling people that they have to serve when they turn 18 in the military.
In other words, you feel that you, as an American citizen, owe nothing to your society.
Yes, you do. And that's why the men sign up for selective service, is that if there is a time of war where they're needed to be called.
Well, women owe nothing to their society, only men.
Women do. Are you saying the women who stay at home and take care of home while the men go out in war are doing nothing? Are you dissing the families that stay home, the women who work hard, to keeping this place going while men go out and fight? Obviously,
I'm not. And obviously, that's a red herring. That's a completely different argument. That straw man you can knock over, but it's not going to work.
You're saying that for me to be worthy, I have to have the exact same role as a man.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
I actually have to become like a man to be.
I am not even remotely saying that.
We either have the
what I'm saying is that men and women should both make at least a 1-year commitment to their nation at some post-puberty point as a way of being part of our society.
We have a voluntary force, and they can volunteer. There's other ways that we can contribute to our nation voluntarily. We live in a society about freedom. If you live here, that's a personal responsibility that we do. And we give to our society in many different ways, in the work that we do, in the service that we do, in communities. It doesn't have to be dictated to us by the government.
All right. I'll leave you with the final word there. D.C. McAllister, contributor to The Federalist, thefederalist.com. You can tweet her at D.C. McAllister, DEN, McAllisterden. Thanks a lot for being with us today. Good talking to you. We'll be back.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.